Welcome to Doc Talk, a weekly podcast featuring Monument Health physicians addressing medical topics. Tune into your health with Monument Health.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Doc Talk with Monument Health. My name is Mark Houston, and mental health, it's one of those topics that touches pretty much everyone, whether you're dealing with something yourself or you love someone who is. Today, we're going to sit down with Dr. Chaston Ellis, who is a psychiatrist at Behavioral Health here in Rapid City, and we're going to talk, hopefully, honestly, about where things are hard and where things are actually getting better when it comes to mental health, because there are bright spots, and I think you just have to know how to look. So I want to welcome Dr. Ellis to Doc Talk. Thank you for coming in and doing this. You're relatively new in the area, right? How long have you been here?
Yeah, so we just moved here last summer. I'm originally from Idaho. My wife's from Nevada. It was kind of a random thing that we ended up this way, but we were charmed by the Black Hills, and we've loved it. So,
what part of Idaho are you from?
East Idaho.
Okay.
So my hometown's called Blackfoot. Pocatello, Idaho Falls are nearby cities. It's not a big area.
Well, I was going to say, that sounds like a very Idaho name for a town right there, for sure. Well, I mean, that's still a relatively pretty part of the country there too, though.
It is. It has its own its own beauty. It's the access to like the Tetons nearby, Yellowstone's nearby. It's not as close as the Black Hills are to Rapid City. Like it's way more accessible here. But there's some very similar. Like people love fly fishing here, hunting, and
well, is that are you into that too? Then are you outdoorsy in that way?
I like skiing. I like whitewater kayaking.
Right.
Which I know there's some of that here in Spearfish, but I haven't done any of that here yet.
Yeah.
I still have to kind of get my toes wet with that. So.
Well, you've been busy. You've only been here since the summer, so I suppose you're trying to work into everything. Well, what led you into this field, though? I mean, when you were, middle school and high school, and do you have family in medicine?
So my dad's a chiropractor.
Okay.
And that kind of led me a little bit to the route of medical school. I don't think I knew very much about it back then, though.
Yeah.
And as far as just mental health, that came much later. I'll say that, so my sister's given me permission to share this story. When she was younger, she struggled with her mental health. So I really appreciated your intro that, you know, I think most of us are touched by mental health and we have loved ones who are affected by it. And she struggled. And I remember thinking that it was hard to find somebody who could see her. And so that was kind of like the first seed that was planted for me to go, it looks like there's a need for this. But it wasn't like the thing that made me go, I'm going to go do this now. But later on, I met my wife in undergraduate, and she was getting her degree in social work. We finished undergraduate, and she decided to get her master's in social work so she could be a full-time therapist. And we'd talk about just mental health a lot and some of the struggles that she was seeing. And it kind of, that seed was kind of growing at that time. It was like, okay, there's kind of some interest here. I wonder what that would look like. And at that time, I was applying to medical schools, and I had gotten accepted soon after. And so I went to medical school down in Vegas, and it was like, didn't know what I was going to do, But then when psychiatry kind of came around, I'd already been exposed to mental health in some ways, and so I was kind of like hoping I'd like it. And I loved the didactics. I found it fascinating. Like I was already very intrigued, and by the time I was in the hospitals and actually seeing patients on that side of things, became so obvious. It's what I loved. So it became pretty easy.
Well, as you're telling me this, I'm thinking, because when a lot of people, I think of psychiatrists, obviously there have been famous psychiatrists that existed throughout history. Are there any, and this is really, this wasn't any of the questions I had, but are there any that you really enjoy or you follow or you think, boy, these guys were on the right track?
I think the one that kind of, there's many people know about Freud and about
all of the
Jung. And so, I think they kind of get a bad rep because they were sort of off on a lot of stuff, but we sort of dismiss that the things that they were foundational for. Mm-hmm. But as far as instrumental more recently, Carl Rogers was a very big one in terms of and how we think about mental health and in therapy specifically. And he was a lot more positivity. But as far as figures that actually influence me now, these aren't going to be people that people know about. There's somebody who's around right now. His name's Dr. Michael Cummings, and he works in California for the I think it's for the state hospital system there.
Oh,
and
wow.
he's brilliant. And so he was going to be, I think he was saying he was going to be a neurosurgeon, but he went blind. And so he had to go off course. And this guy's like an encyclopedia. Whenever he talks, he's on podcasts and things like that. And this guy's brilliant. And so he's somebody who I really look up to and admire, but not like a well-known figure, I'd say.
Well, this is going to be a fun podcast. I don't know if I'm going to bring any brilliance to any of this, but that'll be fine. People will still enjoy it. Anyway, mental health obviously is it seems to have really come to the forefront recently with social media, right? The internet alone, and then social media specifically when we talk about TikTok, right? I mean, this is a big, big deal, I think, when people are trying to get help, or it's hurting in ways as well. And this is the conversation right now. But are people, in your opinion, are they getting the help they need, or are we just talking about it more?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack with that.
Sure.
I think it's both.
Okay.
You know, in some ways, I think exposure and people being aware of it is helping. People are way more understanding that there are mental health concerns out there. I do think that some of the things, I mean, you mentioned social media specifically. Yeah. I'm kind of deviating from your question a little bit here.
No, that's fine.
But I think that there's been a lot discussed about it. I mean, there's so many books right now, like Anxious Generation, and even old, I mean, these books have been out for a really long time. Every 10 years, it seems like there's this monumental anxiety book coming out. And so this has been a concern for a while, but I think it's a lot more loud, the noise for it. But I think it kind of reached a climax during COVID. I remember thinking that this is kind of how I'll phrase anxiety specifically with my patients. So I'll say, you know, a lot of us have struggled with anxiety, right? It's something that's normal part of being human. You go through periods of being anxious. It's about self-preservation and protecting yourself. But I'll give this example that, you know, I want you to have a little bit of anxiety. If you're going to cross the street, I want you to have enough anxiety that you're going to bother looking both ways, right? But I have some patients who come in my office and say, yeah, but my anxiety is so bad that in that metaphor, I can't get across the street. Or maybe I managed to get across the street, but it's impacting my quality of life. And so this is when we say there's an anxiety disorder, right? So when I think about COVID, and I think about these kids who, some of them were like, okay, hey, let's go home, let's do homeschooling or let's do virtual schooling for a little bit. And the kids who had a lot of anxiety were like, yeah, this is great. You know, I don't want to be at school anyways. And, you know, maybe a year later or whatever it was, those kids are invited to come back. And some of them are like, I'm not going back, you know. I've become accustomed to this. And I'm starting to see some of those kids in my office now, they're 18 and 19, and they want to go to college or they want to enter the workforce. And they feel like, I can't do that now. I can't tolerate. My world has become much smaller. And so their exposure has reduced, right? And so when I'm seeing people for mental health, and I think of anxiety with social media, this is a common one where their world has become smaller. We've become more isolated. So this is a very roundabout way to get to your question, but hopefully I addressed it somewhat.
No, I think you did, and it's interesting when you said that like every decade or something, this anxiety, this pops. Is that really the case? I mean, did this even exist before there was social media and the internet, and people still had this same kind of? I think that's good for people to hear, because I think when people, you know, when they're on social media and they see either what they're missing out on or what they're not living up to or what's not, you know, they don't feel like they're accomplishing. I'm sure to them it feels like, well, this never happened 30 years ago. Why would it have, right? This didn't exist. Yeah,
the exposure was different. Yeah. And I think you're onto something there where obviously I think this has been discussed with social media. There's comparison and nobody's putting like their issues that they're going through on social media. I mean, some people might be, but predominantly people are putting, hey, look how awesome things are going, right? And so it's easy to just kind of go, okay, why are things going so great and not for me? And I think there's a bit of a trap there. There's this book called The Happiness Trap, and it's by this doctor who's the founder of this therapy called ACT therapy, or acceptance and commitment therapy. And this book kind of talks about how we have this expectation that happiness should be the norm, or that should be our de facto emotion. when in reality, the human experience is so many different emotions. It's being frustrated, or it's lament or dread, or whatever it is. Sometimes it's euphoria, sometimes whatever it is. But happiness isn't the de facto state. It's all of these emotions. And so if in any one moment you're not feeling happy, you can start feeling like, what's wrong? What's wrong with me? Especially when you compare like this image that's being put out on social media, like it looks like they're so happy and things are going so great.
Well, if someone is sitting at home right now and they're thinking, something's not right, but I don't know if it's bad enough to see someone, what do you tell them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So from the psychiatric perspective, what we're looking for is not just the spectrum of human emotion. Like anxiety is part of our life, even sadness and all those things.
Yeah.
But at some point, people's depression will get to the point where we say this is a disorder. We're going to call it something. We're going to diagnose it, right? And you'll meet these criteria. And so sometimes I'll be talking to patients about, are you still enjoying things? So we call this anhedonia. Do you find joy in your hobbies and activities and socializing, or does that not bring you pleasure or joy anymore? Do you feel like you've lost the ability to concentrate? Your concentration has been impaired. Is your sleep impaired? Is your energy impaired? And there's several other things. Are you starting to have suicidal thoughts? Things like that. When we've met a few of those criteria, we go, okay, I think you're meeting the criteria for what we would call a depressive disorder. You might benefit from therapy, from medications, and from some lifestyle interventions where we can kind of get you back to improving your quality of life. So that's a great question.
Well, that's I think a lot of people they do sit and even some I think read enough or come across enough on social media that they see the things that you have listed off. But I wonder how many people think, well, I can fight through this. I mean, this is fine. I don't need to go see somebody, because now that I know what he's going to say, let me just try to sit and correct this myself.
Yeah.
Does that work?
I think in some cases, yeah.
Really?
In some cases, I think this will be a time-limited period where they're going through some very significant stressor and they're going through some depressive symptoms, but that it's time limited.
Yeah.
In other cases, this is something that's gone on for a while, and by definition, we call a depressive episode where these symptoms have happened more often than not for at least 2 weeks. So if this is going on for weeks, where you've kind of got like the bed rot, where you're just not getting out of bed, you're not motivated, you're not taking care of the things that you need to be in your life. Some people, it's bad enough they're not showing up to work, and their relationships are being affected by this, and this is going on for more than 2 weeks. Yeah, come in, let's get some help. And some people, it's a thing where they're like, yeah, it maybe hasn't been that long, but it's quite severe, and I just want to get ahead of it. And I obviously invite it, come in and let's talk about it and address it.
What's some of the biggest things that people in your mind you feel get wrong about psychiatry?
There's quite a few. Yeah.
I mean, because there are a lot of assumptions out there, let's be honest, right? Are there things specifically to you that you're like, man, I need people to know that this is how it is?
I could do a whole episode on that.
Well, maybe we will. That would be great.
Yeah. Well, let me kind of talk about like a couple big ones. One is that the model of mental health and depression specifically being like a biological, like neurochemical deficiency. I think for decades we've kind of known that there's no such thing as like a serotonin deficiency, but I think people come in thinking that like I don't have some chemical, there's something wrong in my brain, and we've sort of known for a long time that's not the case, but we've known even more recently, like more concretely, that that's not what's going on. And so the reason that it's important people understand that is that when we use a medication, the idea is that we're trying to affect these pathways in your brain that have been affected by stress and by inflammation from stress. I won't get too jargony with that, but I could. And these medications, it's kind of theory that we're using. It's theoretical that these medications are stimulating certain pathways that have been affected by stress and inflammation. But we do see that there's evidence that this theory is accurate. And so when we use a medication, that's the role and the reason we go that route. But I don't want them to dismiss that you can do things for yourself. Medications aren't always the thing that needs to be done. There are lifestyle interventions that can be done. Therapy is a great approach to it. And so there are things that you are capable of affecting in terms of your neurochemistry. It's not just something that needs to be addressed all the time with a medication. There are exceptions. With people with very severe mental illness, like thought disorders like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, things like that, I feel very strongly that they should be using a medication. And there are many other times where a medication is important and warranted because of the severity of their mental illness, and mood disorders and trauma disorders and things of that nature. But I want people to feel like they actually have the capacity and power to actually influence what will happen.
Well, are there technologies that are existing now, though, too? It seems like the better we get with like the robotic surgeries and stuff that we now have in the hospital, quite a bit of, and the imaging that we can get. Does that help in your field? Is there imaging that's getting better and better and better, that we're starting to see these processes that aren't firing maybe like they should?
I think it's definitely in its infancy. I think we're all dreaming of this age where people will come in and we just kind of go, hey,
put a helmet on and
and we go, hey, look, here's your concern right here. Like, just look, there's this little miswiring. We could just kind of, but we're not there yet. I think there's probably people on the cusp of this, right on the frontier, who could kind of speak eloquently about where we're at and some new burgeoning things that they're very interested in. I think from a practical psychiatrist, most of us, we're kind of a ways away from most of that stuff.
Okay.
That's not to say that there's nothing helpful about imaging at all, because there is. It's just it's not often practical yet.
Right. Okay. Well, as you're talking about, sitting down in a room with a person, I mean, it's pretty intimate, the conversations you get to have, right? And I'm sure you obviously work with a lot of people that are going through some pretty dark moments. How do you personally hold on to hope for them when they can't do it for themselves?
Yeah. Wow.
Right?
Wow, what a question. Yeah. So first off, when somebody comes into my office, one of the things I acknowledge is this is a very vulnerable and brave moment for a person to show up.
Yeah,
it's
100%.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's tons of people who are struggling with their mental health who don't ever show up. And that's a step that's difficult to take. And so when somebody makes it there, I say, hey, you've got some momentum going for you. You have hope in your corner already, otherwise you wouldn't be here. And I'm hopeful on your behalf. I've seen people improve. And so that's one of my primary things I'm trying to help with people with, is be optimistic and hopeful that something can get better, because in my experience it does. And so, yeah, I am very optimistic, and that's really one of the things I'm trying to have people experience.
Well, that's a great point. Is the fact that they have taken themselves to sit across from you is such a giant step for these people.
Yeah.
And I think if you could get that across, to be like, look, it's this in your mind. I'm sure it's scary, but look at me. I'm a good dude. Let's sit down and talk. You've already taken that giant leap to be here. Mm-hmm. How do you, in your profession, how do you get people to consider that? I mean, is that like one of the biggest challenges
to show up?
Yeah, just to show up.
I don't have the answer to that.
Okay. Yeah.
It's one of the things that I'm on here for, is to invite that. In most of the places where I've been, I've trained and seen psychiatry, there's a huge wait list, and and psychiatry is a field that's underserved, and there's more need than there is. There's a lot of demand, and there's not enough there. We're in the circumstance now where at Monument Health, they've had a few psychiatrists, but most of them have been there a long time. Their panels are full. Mm-hmm. But they just recently hired 3 new they've doubled the number of psychiatrists they've had. And so there's myself and Dr. Stephanie Bennington and Dr. Kyle Seifers, who all started within about a year and a half ago. And we have a lot of availability. And so one of the things one of the messages I want to send out is you can come in. And oftentimes we're able to get people in almost same day or next day right now.
Oh, wow.
And so this is really cool. I've not been anywhere where we've had psychiatry be that accessible before.
Okay.
So it's, one part of it is getting the word out, but I think there is something else to be said where it's hard to get people to show up.
Well, I'm wondering if, as well, we talked about the dangers that social media can pose to people too. It seems like these newer generations, I'm of the Gen X generation, where we did have to just kind of figure it all out. But I think we still understand that, we could go talk to somebody. I mean, this, we've held a lot of this stuff in from a lot of these years. We could go sit down. Millennials too, I think, kind of got the ball rolling with going to see people about their mental health. Are you seeing that the younger generation embracing this more? more?
I've actually been surprised that I've seen the whole gamut.
Really?
I kind of thought maybe it would be young people that I was seeing more often, but
it seems like they're not as scared of it, though.
I think there's probably some truth to that. I'm seeing somebody who may be somebody in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Sometimes they're coming to me and it's been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
And their concerns have been there for maybe even decades. And this is the first time they're seeing me. I think they're starting to be on the same, they're starting to feel like, yeah, this has become normalized and they're showing up more often. But I think you're right to say that it's been a while. They're turning around to it. Whereas young people, they're coming in the first time and they're young, right?
Yeah. It's because there's always been a stigma with mental health too. But even in my lifetime, I've seen it at its worst of that stigma of, you're just crazy. Why would you, the way that you can be made to feel when you have those issues. People didn't care. They just thought, suck it up. You're fine. Go get a job. Go have kids. Go do something. And now I've seen it almost completely turn around to where, I have a son as well who will talk openly about it. And I'm like, boy, I never would have done this ever. And I'm wondering where that shift happened.
That's a good question. I'm not exactly sure. And it might be back to your thought of social media, like what are the pros and cons? I suspect that it's been normalized in part by social media in ways that are very positive.
Oh, that's good.
Where we go, this is normal to have mental health issues and to seek help for it and to ask for help,
Right.
If there's other things going on, I don't know. But, I think it's really cool that we've seen that shift.
If people are listening right now and they're trying to support a friend or family member struggling, what is the one thing you wish they knew right now? They're in a position where they're looking and seeing a family member, a loved one, a friend they know is struggling. What would you tell them to help that person?
Yeah. It's kind of complicated, but what I'd say is that the best thing from your perspective is to be present, to be loving, and to be there. I think that sometimes I don't want to give too much of a mixed message here, but there are times where I have people who they feel like they've done everything, and they feel like, what do I do next, right? And I think those moments are, you should probably get a professional to come help. Yeah. That's as much as I'd say about that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I was, because I'm thinking when, you may see people that struggle and, it's hard to have that conversation with them to say, look, I think you're, you need something. You need to talk to somebody. That's a hard conversation to have.
Yeah.
I think in a lot of instances.
And I think that many times it's hard to know what to ask. Yeah. And I think when people, start to express what's going on, people have a hard time knowing how to respond to that. How to validate and how to express this is okay that you're feeling this and, I love you and I care about you and I want you to get help. I think that people kind of feel paralyzed to know how to respond to these issues, right? And it's not that I would say to ever I think you should do that. Do those things even if it's hard. Yeah. But then also encourage them hey, let's go together. I'll take you in. I have plenty of patients who their friend comes with them to an appointment or their family member comes with them to an appointment. Or to their therapist, whatever it is. And it might not be that way. You might go the first time, and then they're going to feel comfortable going and being there themselves the second time.
And I think that's interesting because I don't know a lot of people that feel that that's something that you can do. If you're sending somebody to see a psychiatrist, they're like, well, you got to go alone. But it's okay. Maybe
I've had people who come in and they'll go, I'm more comfortable with this person.
Okay. Well, that's really good to know.
Yeah. And sometimes we'll say, okay, I'd like to have, step out for a minute and let's talk about some sensitive information that you might not be comfortable sharing with them here. But then they can kind of come back into the room if you feel more comfortable with them being here after that.
Yeah. All right, that's a great way to kind of wrap this up too. There's a lot of things I want to ask you, Doctor, and I want you to come back and specifically drill down on a lot of this stuff that I think I know I can tell just from this 25-minute conversation that we've had that I can tell that you are passionate about a lot of these things, and I think the one thing you want to have when seeing somebody in your profession is that passion, right? It's just good to know and really, really good to know in this podcast that the accessibility is now there through Monument Health to see you and the people you're working with. So as we're getting ready to wrap things up here for this podcast, is there anything mental health, how we treat it, how we fund it. Anything that you would change right now that you're kind of looking into the future a little bit?
Yeah. That's such a difficult one. I mean, I think obviously it's easy to say we should fund it more, and it's been underfunded, and we see the consequences of it. I see it especially on the inpatient side of psychiatry where people get help, and then it feels like so often they're kind of lost into the system, they leave. And I've been in places where we have teams of mental health that go to people with severe mental illness, people with things like schizophrenia, and they will, once they leave the hospital, we can enter their home and help them. But that's something that requires a lot of funding.
Mm-hmm.
These are oftentimes people who are uninsured or have insurances that are not well funded, Medicare and Medicaid. And it's very difficult to get a team like that. Large cities where these are well funded, sometimes this happens. But you can see where this shows up and where some of these people fall through the cracks, and I hurt for those people. Yeah.
Well, it feels like Monument Health is doing the right thing right now by getting more of this help available, and that's really good news to hear for this area.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Ellis, thank you very much for coming in and doing this. I appreciate it. I hope you are so far enjoying your time here since last summer. We'll figure out a way to get you into a kayak somehow if you're ready. We know lots of people that can take you up and show you a good time up there for sure. All right.
Absolutely.
Dr. Chaston Ellis, who is a psychiatrist of behavioral health here in Rapid City. Thank you for coming in and talking. Let's have you back. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks so much.